In a time when idiocracy has arrived and politicians do nothing but lie and fight over power, two men rose up from the ashes with a message to unite everyone.
Mind your damn business.
Hey everybody, how's it going tonight? Thank you for tuning in. My name's Greg. This is Marco on the far there, and in the middle is our guest tonight, the Grizzly Patriot, Mark Friesen. How's it going tonight, Mark?
Not too bad. You fellas?
Oh, pretty good. You know, probably going to bed after this. So, Mark, we see a little miscommunication in our Patriot movement going on right now. With, kind of how to get to the final goal, how to go about it. Some people think that the protesting and, is suddenly going to get these people to just jump out of office. And, and then there's people like you who think, that the protesting is great and needed to get the message out there, but we also need to get someone actually in the House that has a like-minded that is like-minded and can actually make the change within that we need. So August 29th, there's a protest. It seems like a couple different groups are promoting it, but it seems like there's big tension between those groups. How do you feel about that?
Well, so a couple of things. So in regards to the 29th, number one, I think there's some misunderstanding that I'm organizing that event. I'm not. I'm actually I'm helping promote it. What happened was the folks out of Quebec that have been involved in setting up their very successful protest as of late contacted me, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago and informed me that the 29th is a go, which I thought was great timing because, of course, on the 29th, Germany is planning a massive protest, and then the UK jumped on board, and now there's organizers in the UK for a big protest there. So I thought the timing was perfect, and I thought, okay, good. And I know who Quebec folks are, so of course immediately I got behind him. I said, yeah, no problem. I'll promote the shit out of it. And then about an hour later, folks from the line got a hold of me and told me the same thing. And I was like, yeah, you bet. I'm behind it 100%. I'll promote the hell out of it. So as far as organizationally, I'm not even sure. Like, I know Kellyanne Wolf, one of my contacts there in Ontario with the line, she's doing a lot of work, and they're doing a lot of organizing. They're, I guess, working on getting the stage set up and PA system, and they're talking with the Parliamentary Protection Services and doing all that stuff that needs to be done. So that's good. And the Quebec folks, they're really not organizing the event itself. They're really just they're rallying the masses to be there on the 29th. So that's the first thing. So that's basically where we're at. From my end of things, I'm just promoting it. And so as far as any division or drama, that started as soon as the second that I started promoting the event on the 29th. I got jumped on by Cody Haller because I guess same old, because I was involved with the PPC and ran as a candidate. Somehow I'm not a patriot, and somehow I shouldn't be promoting other people's events. I'm not sure how he arrives at that. I don't care. To me, it's same old. I've dealt with this one particular group attacking me for the last 2 years, simply because my thing, again, I don't denounce what they're doing. I don't agree with their solution. I have a couple of major problems with their idea for the solution. But regardless, I still think they play an important role in educating and informing the masses and as many people as they can. I think it's good. I think ultimately it's a positive. But I don't agree with their solutions, which is whatever. It's neither here nor there. It doesn't mean I denounce them. I don't go openly and denounce and talk shit about anybody. But as soon as I, come forward, I mean, the same thing happened before Canada Day, and I was directly involved in organizing that one. They jumped on me as soon as I started promoting that. Well, whatever. I don't care. I continue to do what I do because I believe in what we're doing. So when we're talking about protests, I think protests are important not because we're going to change the government's path, we're going to change the government's mind. They are completely committed to the path they're on. They've sold out to the globalist and globalist agenda. Everything that Trudeau has done from 2015 to this very date is in line with the globalist agenda, all of it. And so, is a protest going to stop that in the tracks? Of course not. But protests are important not only to come together in a sign of unity and in a sense of unity, that a bunch of people can come together and rally for a cause, but it also shows, and this is where I say it's really important that we have a lot of people there, because it'll show then, the rest of Canadians that are watching things just in passing, maybe they'll pay a little more attention. Maybe they'll think, well, why is there so many people there? What are they so upset about? Maybe we'll turn some light bulbs on and get more people involved and get more people at least researching the what's happening and the issues, because quite frankly, it doesn't matter what any of us do if we don't have critical mass at some point. We're all pissing against the wind.
No, you're correct about that because we see here in Ontario that Doug Ford called the few hundred protesters just a bunch of yahoos. You can pass off 100 people as a couple yahoos, but you can't pass off 100,000 people as yahoos, right? People are going to start paying attention. So you're totally correct about that. And the problem is how do we get to the end game, right? Like me and you kind of see it on the same page. We need someone with the like mind to get in there and actually make the change. Like Elizabeth May and the NDP have pushed the whole spectrum to the left. Those two parties alone have done that. How did they do that? Well, they did it by being activists, getting their name known in their local area, and getting into office and stealing votes away from the Liberal Party, pushing the Liberal Party further left. And then vice versa with the Conservative Party,
Well, I think
they need to steal votes back from the Liberals, so they go left.
Just a little bit on that, Greg. So I think they have definitely, the NDP have definitely played a role in dragging parties to the left. More of just as an example, in survival, the Liberals need the NDP to keep them in power in a minority situation. But we've watched the Conservatives, we've watched the Liberals, the two traditional ruling parties. We've watched them both move to the left. Now, I believe, and I think it's more than just a theory, that when you're committed to the globalist agenda, to sustainable development, and you bring in law into Canadian law in 2008, the Sustainability Act, to live up to the commitments drawn up by the globalists and by the UN, you automatically, by default, end up moving to the left, because the whole agenda is essentially the Communist Manifesto on a global basis. So when you have parties that are committed to these compacts, committed to these agreements and these treaties, well, of course, they're naturally going to move to the left, because the whole agenda is leftist. The whole agenda is a communist agenda. So when you talk about the NDP and the Greens pulling these parties, that's part of it. But I think, like, you look at the Greens, for instance, I mentioned this the other day, in 1992, when the first agreement on sustainable agenda was signed in Rio in 92, immediately thereafter, the Green Party was born. And Elizabeth May, I have it in an email from her admitting that they were created to promote and sort of enshroud themselves in the sustainable development agenda. That's their only purpose. is to promote that agenda. So you're right in the sense that because of what they've been doing, a lot of these other parties, you know, Greg, you know this as well as I do. None of the parties right now, the establishment parties, none of them lead from the front. They all lead by what what's going to get them elected. So ultimately, what the mainstream Canadian is wanting, and this is all
Bingo.
based on. So what do Canadians want? Well, they don't know because no regular mainstream Canadian understands the issues. Nobody researches. Nobody gets the Sustainable Development Agenda. Nobody understands how it's connected to everything. So what you have happen is the media educates and misinforms the masses, who then drive the politicians to do what they want, and then the politicians read the landscape to figure out how they're going to get elected, regardless of principles, regardless of values, and so here we are. This is the how the system in Canada it works. So
Yeah.
I mean, they're all in concert and they're all fulfilling this grand agenda, and it's all leftist. So it's no wonder that, it doesn't matter if it's the liberals or the conservatives in power. We're all being drugged down the same path, and it's no wonder that our energy industry is basically gone. Our fishing industry is gone. Mining is going away. Logging, all of our industries in Canada are under attack. Carbon tax and taxes through the roof to pay for all this stuff. I mean, it's no wonder we're so in debt. Then you throw in COVID and all of the restrictions and the responses by the government. It's all in line with the Sustainable Development Agenda. You look at vaccines, and they've said themselves that 14 of the 17 agenda items of the Sustainable Development Agenda, the 17 goals, 14 vaccines are related to. So all of this stuff is connected, and nobody understands that. Nobody can sort of wrap their head around it. And I'm saying that if we have the ability to unite around a set of core values, and even Bennett was mentioning this yesterday in our discussion, and I believe him to be right, and I think we're on the same path. That if we can rally around the values that we all share across this country, which is freedom, liberty, justice, equality under the law, compassion, tolerance, responsibility, all these things that most Canadians, and I would venture to say probably 90% of Canadians share those core values. So if we can rally together in defense of those values to defend against a common enemy, which is the UN and its agenda, then we have a shot to actually turn this around. But in order to do that, we have to get to the masses. Well, what's the best way to get to the masses? How do you reach the maximum amount of people? I believe that the best way is through the system that none of us sitting here like. That obviously we can agree that the system is a failure, is
Mm-hmm.
broken. However, the majority or the masses still believe that the system works and the system is what it is. So we have to get into that system, and we
Yeah.
have to influence that system, and through that process we can reach a lot of people and educate and inform them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I know people personally that are trying to do that right now through the Conservative Party. I can't mention any names, but it involves one person that's in the leadership race and another person trying to take his position in a certain area. I can't name, but he's doing the same thing as you're saying. He's trying to, like get into the party to change the culture within, which, I agree with, because how are you going to change the system if you can't get in the system? They're not just going to lay down and leave. You know what I mean? They're not just going to give up power because we're outside their door chanting something.
Right.
That's just not how it works. Like, we need to inform the masses, again, to get a like-minded person or people into the house to make these changes that we want.
It's
Yeah,
such an uphill battle, though. Go
It
ahead.
is.
Go
well, it
ahead.
is, and so I mean, then the uphill battle, I think, is this. I mean, I mentioned it yesterday, and I'll say it again. I've said it lots before, and my good friend Salim Mansour says the same thing. That politics is downstream from culture, right? So
Yeah.
it's the culture. Now, I mean, uphill battle, to say the least. I mean, the culture that we've got at this point in Canada is very socialist, very leftist, not because people are generally socialist or leftist, but because the bureaucracy is that way. Our education system is that way. Our media is that way. Our movies, our music, you know. So we're getting bombarded with all of this agenda, and it's, you know, a leftist Fabian communist agenda ultimately, and this is their plan, and they've told us what their plan is, and they've admitted that this is what they wanted to do, and they've done it. And so we've been asleep for so long, and now we're watching it in front of our eyes, the people who, you know, who have some sort of kryptonite to this, like myself, and I sort of fought it all the way along, and others have too, but others are starting to wake up, and it is a daunting task to then change that culture. But I get hope, because I believe that whole thing is not based on hard foundation or granite foundation. It's very swampy, it's very mushy, because it's based on perception instead of reality. It's not based on facts, it's based on feelings. And so, you know, as hard as they have worked to get this to the point that they have it, I don't believe they have the foundation to sustain their position. I think we have the ability to actually turn it around fairly quickly, because we base it on reality, we base it on facts, we base it on a hard granite foundation. So I still have hope, and I think we can turn this around.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Marco.
No, I was going to say, like, my concern is, you know, if we're trying to influence change from within, I totally understand. But when you're going to a party like the Conservative Party, are they not just going to laugh you out the door, or even let you in? Because even if people think that, well, maybe they're like the only shot that we have at getting some semblance of rationality in there, look at what happened to Maxime Bernier, right?
Yeah.
Why'd they go with Andrew Scheer? They did that because, whether you agree with Bernier or not, Bernier represented a radical change from what that party's been used to for so long.
Well, we see it with Randy Hillier in Ontario too. He got kicked out.
Exactly.
Another good example.
Well,
all you have to do is look at, you know, and again, agree with Bernier, like Bernier not. I mean, the facts are he has a certain set of core values that he's had for a long time.
Yeah.
And those values is what he tried to instill in the Conservative Party, and he should have been the leader of the Conservative Party. The election for that leadership was rigged, and they brought in the Liberal votes from the dairy cartel to ensure that Scheer got it over Bernier. And, you know, Bernier still was willing to play cool and try to change things from within, but he got told he's not allowed to speak his mind. He can't speak whatever he wants. So that was the end of that. And so we're seeing that I mean, just this farce of a Conservative leadership race. I mean, we all know how it's going to end. It's going to be McKay or O'Toole, and the other two will be cast off, and we'll see where they go after that. But so there comes a point, even within the Conservative Party, you know, when you're trying to change from within, if you don't have the people backing you in that change,
bingo,
and with critical mass, forget it. They'll weed you out. They'll cast you off. You're done. You're finished, right? Well, that's the same thing the rest of us are trying to do on a national scale. But we have to educate the masses. We have to get critical mass before we can effect the change, because ultimately it's the people that have the power. And if we're not educating and informing the people of what the issues are and what the agenda is, and why it's affecting so many things across the country. If we aren't successful there, we won't be successful at anything else, whatever your solution is.
Well, this is my worry is, like, realistically, are we going to have to hit rock bottom before we find ourselves? I hope not. Obviously, none of us do here. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, we do need to educate. And it's like you said, you know, earlier, Mark, that, you know, you look at the education, the media, and all this other, you know, whatever, people have become so accustomed over the years to learning one set of principles that all they want to do now is work within that narrative. Okay, maybe we can just tweak here and there. And there's no, like, solid, like, set of principles that are based in reality. It's just kind of grasping at whatever feels good. And my worry is like we can all each, we can sit down and we can write and we can try and spread philosophy and we can protest. But at the end of the day, if we're looked at as crazies, I mean, do we just keep going and do we have to change our strategy? Like, I'm just worried that we're gonna have to hit rock bottom before people start going, "Oh, what have we been believing all along? This is wrong." Like, you know?
Yeah, well, we're definitely in a, we're in a, we're in a race, and
Yeah,
the globalists and the globalist agenda in this 10 lap race, they're 7 laps in, and we're just
yeah,
tying our shoe, right?
Yep.
it's a good way to put
And,
it. Yeah,
and so but I still think that, again, I don't know. I don't have a magic, pill or some
no,
sort of, way to reach the masses other than what's, what's afforded and what we create on our own to create these platforms and get our message out. I mean, short of that, I don't know. And it may come to the point, like I still think that all of the consequences to the globalist agenda, I mean, we're seeing them over and over, especially with this whole Wu flu, and there will be a natural pushback and a natural response to these actions, and it's only going to get worse. It's just a matter of how bad it's going to get
right,
before the amount of people necessary to push it back comes to be. So I mean, who knows? It may come right to the point of there's no other way but then a revolution of some degree. I don't think we're there yet because I don't think there's enough people that are that upset because they don't understand everything at this point. And
I
this is
think you'll
what's
see it in
frustrating for not only me, but I know a lot of other groups are frustrated because they understand, they get it, they know what's coming, and it's extremely frustrating. So they're trying to sort of put the cart before the horse, I think, uh, without the support of the masses of people that you need to actually affect the change. So for me, priority one is to inform the masses, be there when they start asking these questions and they start wondering for themselves on an individual level, door to door, what the hell is going on here, and why can't I feed my family? Why can't I pay my mortgage? Why am I losing my house? All of these things. Why am I losing my job? Why is my business going under? All of these things. Once
right,
people are hit that hard and that, then they'll start standing up and say enough's enough. But at what stage? Everyone's level of I guess demise is different. So it's just kind of like we have to get to that point of critical mass, and then we'll have the power of the people to affect change. But until then, it's like I know we're beating our head against the wall, but somehow. And I think the other thing too, I just want to mention this whole unity thing in all these different groups. I really believe that once it gets really even worse than it is now, people will drop their agendas naturally because it's so bad and we have to just come together uh, because there's no other option. Then I think all of these other things will go to the wayside and we'll all end up going in the same direction, fighting for the basic values that we all share. And once we get to that point, we'll have that unity, and we will get there. It's just a matter of when.
Do you
Uh,
think? Do you think that just real quick there? Do you think that we need to attack it from a moral standpoint or from an economic standpoint? Because it seems to me like we can point, and even show figures if needed, and historical examples of what happens. Even countries like Venezuela or Cuba or Zimbabwe or whatever,
Uh,
you spend too much money. The problem is people are conditioned to think, well, we're never going to get that to that point. We're never get to that point.
right,
So at one
right.
point, right? But the problem is the socialists have the moral high ground. Oh, how could you say that we should privatize healthcare? My
Right.
grandma can't afford this and that and the other. Well, she'll die. Well, I'm on a low income. How will I be able to? Or if you talk about education, well, what you just want an illiterate population to pay tuition? No, we want competition, drive prices down. But again, people don't see the parts of the economy that aren't as regulated, and they don't put two and two together. So
well,
they always think of the worst, right?
they also have in their mind that all these big bad corporations will team up and just make prices so high anyways, which
Right.
isn't true. And
Yeah, pollute the environment and all that fun stuff. Yeah.
But I think we can take the moral high ground if we do educate the people, because
Yeah.
if we
I
show
think
the benefits of a free market and freedoms and liberties for everybody,
we
and
have to hit them in the moral high ground too. We can't just be like, well, taxes need to lower in spending. We need to actually look at how their philosophy is immoral. You know?
Well, I think again, it's going to come to the point where it's going to be down to these basic values that people
Mhm.
have, and so I mean, what are those again? It's freedom.
Mhm.
Find me a Canadian that doesn't value freedom. You may, once you dive into that discussion, you may find, some people's way of achieving or protecting freedom might be different, but that's up
Yeah.
for debate. But the core value itself is there. Justice. Everybody wants justice, and again, you have different ways of arriving at that or achieving it or protecting that value, but we still have that core value and liberty, individual liberty and freedom. I mean, most people want to be able to have their own self-determination, and I mean, when you move to self-reliance, maybe that number is a little bit less because of culture, and a lot of young folks believe they have this entitlement and all these other things, but
Yeah.
ultimately they still want their freedom. They still want self-determination. There might be an argument of how you get or arrive at that, but ultimately those core values is what's under attack. And if you can unite people around those basic core values and fight to defend those, then we can ward off, the bigger picture. And then we can come back and sit around and say, okay, so now that we have this in Canada, we've defended that, we've defended against globalism. Let's look at how we want to, move forward. And then you get into the debates, whatever. But I mean, as long as these policies and as long as these values are Canadian and within our borders and within our greater culture, I'm good to just back off and let smarter people than me take the helm and say let's take this thing forward. But I think it's going to just boil right down to these basic common values that we have to defend, and
Yeah.
then we can sort of move forward. That's the kind of the way I look at it. I know it's simplistic, but
Yeah.
how much do you think the November election in the States is going to
huge.
affect our movement? Yeah,
Well,
huge,
it's
eh?
huge in the sense that, I mean, Trump represents basically representing Western civilization. And I know, Trump is American and America first, and I get it and I respect it. But because they are the big boy on the block, and I mean, they are essentially the defender of Western civilization, I mean, we need them, and we need Trump to be that. I mean, I've watched both of his speeches now at the UN in 2018 and 2019, and they were probably the two best speeches I've ever heard anyone give. Um, just because he put it out that, we're looking after America first. Now, of
Right.
course, because he's in place, I think COVID and the response to it, a lot of it, I believe, is done to hammer Trump and to have him lose the election, or at the very least, scorched earth, right? Like, I don't think the Democrats even believe themselves that they can beat Trump in the election. But I think part of it is just, if I can't have it, let's burn it all down, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah.
so that's what I see, even with BLM and all these things. It's done with purpose to destroy everything, burn it all down, and let the globalists come in and piece it back together and blame it all on Trump, right?
Yeah.
That's what I see.
Yeah. That's unfortunately what socialists and communists pretty much since like the beginning of really like their ideas started forming was it's always been about
Yep.
wiping the slate clean,
Yep.
revolutionary ideas, but revolutionary in the sense that like we got to start from scratch, not and the
Yep.
problem is that this goes back to when you mentioned individual rights. I was going to say one of the most insidious, poisonous beliefs that people have bought into in Western civilization is this mythical concept that we have these things called collective rights. No, a collective is just a bunch of individuals, right? And maybe I've been reading
Yep.
too much Ayn Rand, but she really makes a lot of sense. in the sense that like she talks about how the collective rights is a myth, right? Because what you can either have one or the other. Like you either have freedom or force. You can't say on the one hand that you're a free autonomous individual, you're able to do whatever you want as long as you don't harm anybody else, but then say, oh, by the way, you have to sacrifice for XYZ because they have needs. It doesn't mean that you can't help somebody. It doesn't mean you shouldn't. It's just a matter of like, is charity a virtue or is charity just something that's like, okay, it's like it's like a more of a, I guess, a bonus, right? The problem is a lot of Canadians have developed this myth in their heads that, well, if we don't pay taxes, then nobody's gonna get help, as if like we wouldn't be able to just pay like user fees for a lot of the things that we value now, right? And
Yep.
it's so like how, again, I asked like how can we possibly, whether it's through protests or writing or something, can we get through to even like just two people, one person, that this idea is just a myth, that you can't have both, because right now it's like this balance, right? Or you can balance individualism with collectivism, because you can't, because if you go too far to the individual side, then we're just gonna have this totally like this Mad Max society, right? It's crazy, you know. Anyway, that's my little rant for today.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yep, no.
Well, I was taught one after you went off the air with Bennett yesterday, and I referenced we're basically in Canada. We're born into the matrix, right? We through our school systems and everything else, we're conditioned into their system without even knowing it, right? When you're born and you're a kid, you don't know anything. You just go to school and do what you're told. So
Yeah.
you're in the matrix right away. So to break out, and what I would say, why that got brought up was because Bennett's whole thing was you were a correctional officer for 25 years. Well, sometimes it takes others longer than other people to get out of the matrix, right? Like when did they get that pill?
Well,
When
and
did that moment happen?
That's a good example, and I wish I would have had some time and maybe some airspace to go through it a little bit deeper. But I thought about it after, and I thought, listen, what I should have said, and what I wish I would have had more time to get into is, Bennett, I understand his point sort of on a surface level, but I mean, here's a good example, right? So I'm brought up by my folks who, one's a teacher, one worked for the city. They're small town Saskatchewan folks. They sort of they themselves were brought up in the Tommy Douglas era of, oh my God, free health care, public health care. Woo, this is wonderful. This is awesome. Blah blah blah. And so I'm brought up in this thing, and I was always a bit of a rebel, and fought against a lot of the things that they were trying to teach me. I was bombarded with it at school, but I still, even with that sort of sense that I have, I still bought into the programming that what I'm supposed to do is I finish high school, I either go to university or I find a good government job that's secure, that gives me a pension, that I can support a family. Then I'm supposed to get married and I'm supposed to have kids, and the rest is, I live like a slave, but I have guaranteed income and I have security in the down times, right? Because working for the government, you're guaranteed your position, and blah blah blah. So that's what I did, right? So once I got into it, and of course, then I got married, then I had kids, and now all of a sudden, I had this strong sense of being completely trapped. I learned in a very short time that I was just a number. I was a slave for the man. I meant nothing on an individual level. I was simply filling a uniform with an employee number, and I mean absolutely nothing, not only to the employer, but to the union that I was part of. So I became this nothing. I wasn't an individual. I was nothing. I was just a place and so, but at that point, when I have a young family and I have a wife, and then I go through a divorce, it's not like I can just say, okay, I quit, and then what? And then do what? Right? Like you end up getting trapped in the system that you started in. So you get through, and then of course, once my kids grew up and they were older, and I got through my divorce and I remarried and things settled down, I was able to sit back and say at 44 years old, you know what, I've done 25 years in corrections. I can't stand the bureaucracy. I can't stand not being a person. I'm just a number, and I'm beating my head against the wall, fighting these assholes on a daily basis, whether it's management or the union. So yeah, I was able, because I started my business before I was able to quit corrections. The business worked out that I was able to leave, and I left, and I couldn't be happier to be, the architect of my own success now, and I feel like, whatever, it's mine, and I have my individuality back, and blah blah blah. So all those things are good, but it's not as easy as, of course, Bennett likes to portray it. But of course, Bennett likes to give himself stars and smiley faces, and how great he is because he's never worked for the man, but he still pays taxes, so he's just as much of a slave as the rest of us.
Well, we're all slaves, and like people like to talk about, oh, we ended slavery. No, they just expanded slavery. When they ended the slavery with the African Americans, they just expanded it to everybody through taxes and social programs that everyone has become dependent on over the last 150 years. Like let's people love to blame the liberals, but let's not forget who has brought in every tax ever in the history of Canada. It's always been the Conservatives. Always been the Conservatives. The Liberals just raise the taxes. Conservatives bring them in. Like it's the two different wings of the same bird. And
yeah, man.
Like I always say, over 150 years, there's only been two parties in power. Do you not think that at some point they didn't get together and play good cop, bad cop, and be like, we can control this forever? Like any common sense person can think of that in 5 minutes. Like it's ridiculous and more. But I don't think we need to shun each other because it took you this long to get away from the man. I know some brilliant people, like our buddy Mark Snow. He's a brilliant man. He was in the Army. And he, for 30 years and did tours, but he figured out these are false wars, and he didn't want to fight anymore. And he had his pill moment and woke up and got out. Now he's fighting with us. You can't shun these people. You need to embrace these people and welcome them in and be like,
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like you say, and you're absolutely right. It is the matrix that we're all born into, raised into. And so, I embrace anybody who has broken away from that. Doesn't matter how long they were part of it. I mean, what matters is what you want, what you believe now, what your values are. And if you share the same values as me, then we are standing side by side in the fight for those values. That's it. Like this whole idea that everybody has to do it this way or we're going to cast them off. Well, we're finished if that's the attitude we're going to take.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like people like you and like Mark and other veterans who have broken away, they're going to reach the masses easier because they can relate to people that still work for the man. And
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I don't really see what this division should be all about. We should all be about love and embracing each other and fighting against the common goal, which is communist socialists.
You find that same attitude toward Maxime Bernier because, in 2008, he signed some agreement that was detrimental to Canada, maybe in favor of China or some other thing. Well, of course he did, because he was part of the Conservative Party. He was part of the establishment. He toed the party line. Of course he did. But doesn't he deserve a boatload of credit for actually denouncing that and now turning the page and even himself? And this is part of growth. This is part of learning. We're all going to learn. We're all going to grow. And so is he. I mean, the change, even from the time he created the PPC, and brought those core values with him that allow people like me to get involved. But even from that point till now, I've seen a huge evolution in Maxime Bernier as far as identifying globalism as the big problem, as the head of the snake. And I mean, we're talking about somebody who was deep in it and still didn't have an understanding. And I believe that to be true with most of the MPs that are still there right now. Outside of the upper echelon of each of the parties, most MPs are just going along to get along, just to whatever. They don't understand anything. They don't get it. I've talked to Salim about this, and he's been pretty deep. And I asked Salim, why is it that these guys don't understand what the hell's going on? And he said, because they all live in their own little bubble, Mark. They don't research. They don't take the time to understand. They do what they're told. They do what their party wants them to do to maintain their position. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all they do.
Yeah, well, that's what the whole party whip's job is to whip everybody into the vote their way, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and I think another good example of someone who gets a government check but fights for individual rights is Tim Moen. He's a paramedic and a firefighter, right? Like, he works for the government. But but like, you're gonna tell me he's any less of a patriot than anybody else? Like, that's ridiculous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And there's a lot of examples, and what you said is right, that anybody that's worked within the system maybe has more of an advantage to fight against it, because we understand it, we lived it, we worked it, and what better people to bring to the fold than that have gone through that and understand it and understand how to get us out of it. I don't know. It's
plus people who are still working in the system that are fighting for freedoms like us. They're putting their livelihood and their neck on the line. But, they're fighting against their bosses. So, like,
but I'll tell you too, it was very refreshing and very liberating once I was retired, and I didn't have to worry about what I was saying politically or what my positions were on social media,
right?
And that it's going to come back and haunt me at work. It was very liberating to know that I didn't have to worry about that anymore. I still have to worry about it being a business owner. I mean, my business has been under attack online by Antifa simply because of the positions I take. So there's still consequence to my actions, but at least I'm in control and I can understand and I can defend against that and whatever. But it boils down to, I guess, how strong and how much conviction do you have to your values and what you're willing to sacrifice in defense of those. And I mean, everyone has a different threshold and everybody has a different, line in the sand, I guess. And we have to recognize that. And we have to appreciate that. And we have to respect the people that, can only go a certain degree because of circumstances, and then there's other people like myself that, it's balls to the wall. And I get it. I'm in the position to do that. So I do it. And so, it is what it is.
I have a question for you, Mark. Hypothetically, suppose that you were prime minister, right? You've got the keys to the kingdom. What's your first act as prime minister in week one, or even day one?
Minute one would be to write a letter to Antonio Guterres, letting him know that Canada will no longer be committed to the Sustainable Development Agenda. Then my next letter after that would probably be resignation. I'm serious, because I wouldn't want the job, but I would be wrong enough to get us the hell out of that agenda and give Canada back to the people, and then say, okay, somebody smarter than me's taking over. I'm retiring. Thanks very much for my 3 minutes. Goodbye.
You'd have to make sure that no politician can come in and put us back into that agenda.
Yeah, well, you'd want to put in some safeguards and whatever, sure, but you know what I'm saying. You know what my point is.
Fair enough.
That'd be hilarious. All right, I'm done. I did what I wanted. I'm out. New election. So, what are your feelings on this whole Morneau resigning and Freeland coming in? Seems like Trudeau just put his best yes woman in place that will put do his agenda.
Worse, believe
it or not.
It's going to be worse because now that they've pulled the cord on it. First of all, Morneau is going to be pushing for that OECD job, some sort of Secretary General of the UN, whatever. So, that'll be fun for him. And Freeland's just going to come in and do exactly what Trudeau tells her to do. And she understands the globalist agenda. She understands the UN Sustainable Development Agenda and all the things that are attached to it. And it's going to be worse.
She's the real
I get a
PM.
kick out of these fucking politicians that are all lining up, conservative or liberal, it doesn't matter. They're all lining up, congratulating Freeland and saying, "Oh, wonderful she is." I mean, even what's her name there, Rempel was tweeting about, breaking the glass ceiling, and oh, good God, it's like, really? But that's the state of affairs right now.
That party's not going to be any. It's going to get worse when McKay gets in. Like, that guy is as red as red, and he's a snake, and he's going to push it. It's going to be horrible. But you have these conservatives. You have these conservatives that are just like, well, McKay, he's the only one that can steal votes back from the liberals because he's a moderate. And
you said that about Scheer.
Yeah, liberal light.
It's amazing. You see these conservatives, especially on Twitter, is where I see it most, and all they care about is winning. Like, so McKay has the best opportunity for the conservatives to win. Win what? Like, what are you winning? Just so you can say that you might as well join the Liberal Party if it's winning is all that matters.
Yeah.
Right. Like, the lack of principle, the lack of conviction, the lack of anything. It's just it's disgusting. They absolutely refuse. It's like they're all just Saskatchewan Roughrider fans. It doesn't matter as long as we win. It doesn't matter how we do it or what we do, or nothing matters. It's just blue, go blue. We got to stay blue, and it doesn't matter what they do with it. It's insanity. But anybody that supports any of that and complain about corruption, they're just as corrupt. The voters are just as corrupt as the politicians.
Yeah. It's like what George Carlin said. You can't blame the politicians. It's the culture. Shit in, shit out.
Absolutely.
That's the way it is.
Absolutely.
That's why
it's like these folks that push for throughout the yellow vest and a little bit now, but they're pushing for this full-on referendum, right? So direct democracy. And I'm thinking to myself, the culture that we have in Canada right now, are you kidding? We were able to elect Trudeau twice. You want to give that power to the people, to the masses, to make decisions? Oh God!
Although, I hear you, because I'm a big proponent of like direct democracy, because the way I look at it is like, if we're going to be affected by issues anyway, I'd like to have kind of like a hybrid system of representative and direct democracy. That way, if the culture does start to shift a little bit, the pendulum does start to shift, we at least have a little bit more power than we do right now, where we're kind of crossing our fingers.
I don't dispute, or I don't. There's nothing. I don't mind a little bit of direct democracy, especially on bigger national sovereignty issues. I think that's something we could probably, through education, through information. If there's a big decision that's to be made, okay, we're going to spend 6 months talking about this, educating people on the issue, and we're going to go vote on it in a direct sort of referendum way. I'm all for that. I get that. This whole idea of full on direct democracy for everything. We're not there yet.
No, I absolutely not. We're definitely not Switzerland.
Exactly.
Because I look at like different elements too, like not just referendums, but I look at things like recall. Now, pros and cons to it, right? Because it doesn't mean that like a labor union can't just try and like, oh, Doug Ford cut this, so we're going to try and get him out, or you know what I mean? Right. But I think that, for example, someone who breaks their promises or who brings in policies that they never campaigned on, I think that might be grounds to at least.
So let me ask you then. So do you?
Sure.
Are you pro-democracy or are you pro-republic?
Both. I can't stand the monarchy. I would love to see it gone tomorrow. And I think that
as I move along, I get further and further away of being a proponent of democracy, because ultimately that turns into mob rule. Right?
Yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah,
Well,
I'm pro-republic.
I think
I
the
mean, I guess mob rule is fine as long as that mob, as long as I'm part of the mob. I guess no problem, right? But
Right,
if
but
I'm not, and
democracy
I'm
is
not right now, I'm not big on the mob. So
you know what it is, because I look at the alternatives, right? And absolutely, there's always risks, but it's like, what's that saying? You know, democracy is the best form of government that we have, except for all the others that have been tried before it, right?
Yeah,
Because the
right.
alternative is dictatorship, right? I mean, we can hope for
Well,
the
is it
benevolent dictator.
or is it a republic? Because everyone likes to refer to the states as a democracy, but it's really not. It's a republic.
it's a republic.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think there might be confusion in our terminology. So, like when you say republic, because when I think of a republic, I just think of like the absence of a king or a queen. That more or less, whether it's a democracy or
Yeah.
not. That's
Well, I think most people think in those terms. So when I say
right.
I'm going against democracy, people look at me like I have three heads, right? But but I my point is that America isn't a democracy; it's a republic. So they have they have their voting system, which allows representation on an equal footing, regardless of population, right? So
Is it a bit of both?
they have the college, the electoral college, so
Right.
Trump can get elected, and
Right.
it avoids a situation that New York and California basically rule the roost and dictate what the
Right.
rest of the country is going to get.
Right.
I like that. I like the ability to have equal representation, regardless of population.
Well, the republic also restricts the power of the feds too, and it gives more power to your local area.
Yeah,
Which that's
I'm
what
also,
I like. Which I like a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because
I think
face
that
it, even in a country like Canada, I mean, we have such vast differences from region to region, province to province. So we should have more autonomy to rule our own provinces and our regions,
yeah.
within the subculture of our country, and make
Mhm.
determinations that are in our best interest in Saskatchewan over, whatever. So, yeah, I completely agree to that as well. And we
Well,
need more
yeah.
autonomy to the provinces.
It kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, 100 and over almost 200 years ago, right? Confederation happens. We're all under the, we got the separation of powers, obviously, or division of powers with the different levels of government. But it almost makes you wonder, like with Wexit or the Quebec separatist movements over the years and such, like, is a deconfederation a better option to start pushing for if we really want autonomy? Because, like, if you look
Well,
back in the day,
yeah.
that's what they did. That's what the arguments were. Because a lot of people, like the people who didn't want confederation, were like, "Well, wait a minute. Like, I don't want your problems to be my problems. Like, we're fine here." That's why PI didn't join until a bit later, and Newfoundland didn't join until way later.
Yeah,
Right?
look how well that turned out for them. They
Well,
yeah. But being from the West, Mark, what are your feelings on the whole Wexit movement?
Well, again, that's another group of folks that I don't denounce. I don't denounce the movement because I think they're playing an important role in everything that's happening, and I think it's a place for people to vent their anger and frustrations and show the feds that we're tired, we're fed up, we've had enough. But I'm not a proponent and I'm not a member of it because it really scares the shit out of me, because understanding the globalist agenda. Listen, George Soros and the likes, he's not the only one. There's numerous others that do it. But they go into these countries and they break them up. They break them up because once you break them up, they can come in and easily install whoever they want as a puppet, and they automatically have all the control they need. What do you think's going to happen to Canada once it splits? I mean, I've had this debate with Peter Downing on my channel, and they can't answer the questions that I need them to answer for me to be a proponent, which is, if you achieve your goal, what happens the next day when you still can't get your pipelines to Tidewater because BC stands in your way? What are you going to do? Who are you going to depend on? And his first answer the first time around was, well, we're going to use the UN and their international law to force pipelines to the coast. And I'm like, you're playing right into the hand. That's exactly what I'm scared of. That's exactly the wrong. But he used the clause that the UN has, and they have an international law that but it's dedicated for these third world countries like Afghanistan to have access to a port, right? So they do help these countries. Well, what does help mean? It means you're dependent on the UN, which means they control your ass. And that's exactly what you're
Yeah.
giving up. So, you know, whenever we get to that point of the discussion with people from Wexit, I say, okay, well, that's where I can't support you. That's where I'm not a proponent. I get your frustration. I understand. I live here. I've been living here for 50 years. I get it. I'm tired of getting screwed. But separation does not fix the problem. It might even, in fact, make it worse. Unless you want to be a 51st state of the United States.
I was just going to say that. I was going to
some
say
people
that. I'm a little
like that
surprised they didn't go that way. Say, because Alberta values, I find, more line up with the United States values than Canada as a whole. You know, as we're more of a socialist country, and
Yep.
I find more people in Alberta, you know, they're more about individual rights and more of like a constitutional.
But you see what
province.
happens. I mean, you know, it's attractive right now at the moment because Trump is in America and Trump is America first, and he's doing what's best for America and Americans. So it's attractive. But look past your face. Look 5 years down the road when they elect Democrat again, or they elect Democrat for 2 terms in a row, and that Democrat is
AOC.
Right. And then all of a sudden, what? Then what are you going to do? Are you going to come back to Canada because you're not happy with the communism of America? I mean, it's not a fix-all. But again,
No.
I mean, some people have that opinion. I don't share it. So
Well, you might be dragged into a civil war you don't want to.
Absolutely. Yeah,
they're very close down there. I feel like that it's brewing.
Oh yeah.
Especially with these lockdowns and mass mandates.
With this election, regardless of who wins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's going to be a shit show come November.
Yep.
I feel. You just feel it brewing, like with all the protests going on right now, and then you got the right, who right now is mainly peaceful, but once the right, like the Republicans start bearing arms and more,
well,
the
militias are already marching.
Do you not find though it's weird? Do you not find it's weird though that some of them are marching with the left?
Well, there's that BLM militia that's whatever. Yeah, but I just watched the video. I think it was yesterday, or the day before, of a regular, long time, good old boy militia, and they're marching. And I think the election, the day after the election, is going to be a absolute shit show, and it may kick off something that I don't know. Some may want to see, some don't want to see, but. And ultimately, maybe that's what it takes.
How do you think that would affect Canada if the states went into a civil war like that, a right versus left civil war? How do you think would affect?
I'm not sure it wouldn't bleed over.
Well, that's what I'm afraid of, because the culture in the states really affects the culture in Canada. What happens?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Canada was involved in the first Civil War, right? Like with the Underground Railroad and everything else like that. So don't think Canada wouldn't be involved somehow.
The Canadians like to look at American politics. It's funny. They like to point at, America bad, almost like a comparison, but they're enthralled, whether they want to admit it or not. Sadly, sometimes at the expense of our own issues, and we have a lot. But it's like because they like this big 2 or 3 year spectacle of their elections. They follow the media, their pop culture, and then on the other hand, it's like, but at least we're not like them.
Well, especially right now with the media and Trump, they can hide all our scandals by just focusing on Trump, and everyone here gets divided by that, and they don't pay attention really to the weed scandals or like Aga Khan or anything else that's goofball has done.
If I were to wear a Make America Great Again hat walking down the street, I'm sure at least somebody here in Canada, in where I live, they're gonna say something.
Where do you live?
Ottawa.
Oh,
nation's capital. So I'm make that up. So someone's gonna say something.
I think I can get away with it in Saskatoon fairly well. I probably have very little problems, very few problems if I did.
Yeah.
Even other places, the further west you go,
Yeah, I guess that's.
Well, until you get to BC.
Well, think of Vancouver.
Yeah, once you get to Vancouver, you're fucked.
Yep.
Oh, that's the most liberal. I've lived in Vancouver and I've lived in Regina and everywhere else out west. And holy, it's a vast difference, definitely.
Oh, it is. I lived there for 4 years, and that was more than enough.
I love the landscape of BC.
Yeah.
It's the most beautiful province in Canada.
Yeah,
but
beautiful.
The culture is just uppity, and who drives the best car and who has the best.
Once you get outside of Hope, it's generally pretty cool. Unless you get into Kelowna a little bit sideways. But I mean, you go through the interior and southern interior, and even up by Prince George. It's just good folks that work hard for living and
definitely. Well, you get into Victoria and Vancouver, it's pure.
Yeah,
it's like Toronto.
I mean, if we could manage to put up a wall from Hope, just put up a wall at Hope and say, okay, Lower Mainland, Victoria, you're on your own, forget about it. And then another wall probably around Ottawa, Toronto, because everyone likes to shit talk Ontario, but I mean, I've driven through there a couple times lately, and I'm seeing just regular folks all the way through until I get just outside of Ottawa, and then it's just this upside down,
Oh, my area. I live in between Ottawa and Toronto, and my area is definitely anti-Trudeau and anti-globalist. Right? Like Belleville has protests every Thursday, so. But you get into the big cities, and I like to say, well, it's easier to herd the sheep in the big cities to get your agenda across than it is to the rural areas, where out west is a lot of rural areas, right? And even the big cities aren't big cities. Like they're 300,000 people is a big city out west, right? Like Saskatoon, Regina.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just, but that's where
we got our fair share. We got our fair share of lefties here too. We got a university. I mean, our mayor and our whole city council are all commies, as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, it's not like we don't have our battles, but generally speaking, it's completely different.
Oh, our city council is total commies, for sure. Like threatening private building owners to make them sell their buildings if they don't go by the COVID standards. We have our battles, but we have some people with him that are good people, but they're the mayor tries to shun him, and it's a big battle. But it's, as we said yesterday, it's not a short-term battle; it's a long-term battle. Probably your whole lives are going to be fighting this, so it's crazy. It's the same battle that's been going on before we even were born. Any of us, you look at Russia, you look at other countries that, Cuba, all this.
It's interesting. It's interesting how quickly the culture has changed because, when I was growing up, my high school days, that whatever throughout the 80s, we all there was no debate of who the enemy was. The commies were the enemy. Russia was the enemy. It was very clear, there was no marches for communism. There was nothing. It was all are you kidding? There was maybe the odd, idiot that whatever, but generally speaking, things were much easier. The rules were well defined. We're against communism. We're about freedom. And, it was pretty easy. So that culture changed really fast, from the 90s into the 2000s. And I mean, now it's just a shit show.
Because media changed. Journalists changed because if you remember, I remember the 80s as well, even down from the Rocky movies and, every American commercial had the red, white, and blue colors somewhere. Everything was pro-America in the 80s during Reagan and everything and Bush, right? But then it started really with Clinton. With that Clinton switch. The media, CNN came in, and everything else started to switch. And you're right, it switched quick. And got into the schools and everything else. And now you have all these young people growing up thinking, everything's fair through the government. And it's fucked up thinking, because how is everything fair through the government when we don't? None of us are the same. None of us have the same needs, the same wants. Well, socialism just basically deletes wants totally.
Yep.
But
Absolutely.
as I said to Bennett yesterday, I think a lot of these kids growing up who want, they say freedom, but they think freedom is equality through government. They're just confused. They're not educated. They don't know what actual freedom and rights are, because government doesn't give freedoms and rights. They take them away.
But I found it interesting being a candidate and running a campaign. Of course, I got to go to a couple of high schools, to a couple of forums, and because I was saying things that were far different than any of the other establishment candidates, because they all read from a book, they all just have the talking points, blah blah blah, and then of course you stick me up there, and I'm completely different than the rest. And then after it was over, I'd have 10, 12, 15 kids surrounding me because they appreciate the fact that I was honest and I just spoke freely, and I just told them what I thought, and they really appreciated that, because they're exposed to something different than the narrative, than what we're continually beaten into our skull through our whole educational time. I mean, it's like, wow, this is something new. This is great. So I really, it's about exposing the message and exposing the truth, to especially to kids, because their minds are such a sponge, and they're desperate. They don't even know how desperate they are to hear the truth, because they never hear it.
Yeah. Yep, you're totally correct. So, just to wrap things up here, tell us a little bit more of what's going to happen at August 29th in Ottawa.
From what I understand at this point, it starts at 12, and I guess they have a couple of bands scheduled now. So they're going to start with some entertainment, and I guess the speeches will start at 2. I don't know who's on the speakers list. They asked me to provide them a list of speakers, so I'll do that. And but there's a lot of energy coming out of there. My phone's been ringing off the hook the last couple of days of people inquiring, so I know there's a lot of talk. So I mean, the number one thing is as many people as possible. Again, not to change the direction of the government, but to show the rest of Canada that we mean business, and there's a reason why we're all standing there doing that. And the more people we get out, the more success we're going to have in achieving that. So
yeah, for sure, and definitely we'll be down there as well. We're promoting it as well. We need everybody out there. If you have that weekend off, get down to Ottawa, get down to Parliament Hill, 12. Check out some cool bands and let your voices be heard. We definitely don't want this globalist agenda. It's going to tear us apart and ruin our country, and we want to stop it before, again, no one wants a war. We want to stop it before we get to that point, because there's really only two end games.
And just one little quick note, 2 of the phone calls I received in the last couple of days was from people that are basically at the end of that line. They're basically the ones that are talking about lawful action. I'm not saying armed uprising, but they're at the point where they need to take some form of action over and above protest. So it is definitely moving in that direction. I still think we need more protest and more education and more people involved in these. But the feeling is definitely out there that action needs to be taken too. So we'll see where that goes.
Well, the mass is going to go where the mass goes, and hopefully they keep it.
Absolutely.
Hopefully they keep it peaceful. I don't want anybody hurt. No, I don't think any of us do. But
nope.
That it's not us driving this force. It's the people that are controlling these laws and everything else are driving this. So if they keep going with it, the worse it's going to get. And it's sad to see, really. But anyways, on that note, man, we're going to end this here. Great talk to you, Mark. We'll be in touch soon for sure. So all you out there again, August 29th, get out there to Ottawa. Let your voices be heard. Have a good night, guys.
Ciao.
Thanks.